going on, everybody? I'm back with another video. This video is going to be looking at the match between Manchester City and Wolves and how Manchester City strengthened their hold over top spot in the English Premier League with now just two games to go and 3 points ahead of Liverpool. They are extreme favorites now to take the title in the last two matches, but they were very impressive in their tactical movement and some of their structure as well against a disciplined Wolves side, and we'll get into that. But first, check out the OneFootball app. It's the best app out there for all things football. It's the app I use to stay up to date with all the latest games, leagues all across the world, and the latest news. Now, it's a free app, 100% free, and there's a link in the description below. They're sponsoring today's video, and they've been supporting the channel for the past 2 months. This is the last month of our collaboration, so be sure to download with the link in the description, and that's me on your screen scrolling through the app showing you the features, so be sure to do that. And while you're in the description, check out both my books. There's links to them. They're online on Amazon. And check out Keyframe. It's how I'm making this video. Now let's get right into the tactics behind the match. So we go with the initial build-up of 4 players, as we have seen from Manchester City this season, but how they get here is a little bit different in this match. So now we have our fullbacks centered around the half spaces and the players in the fullback position, one being Rodri. I know he's a holding midfielder, not a fullback, but we'll look at how he gets in himself this role and why he does so. This then leaves Gundogan as the single pivot against this 5-3-2 from Wolves. So the two strikers from Wolves are positioned a little bit wider and then protected from a 3-man midfield that orientate themselves, then control the space between the lines and have the ability to shift across into the wide area to the narrow fullbacks. So now let's talk about Rodri and his role in the match. This was perhaps the biggest tactical trend and the biggest change. Rodri would drop into the right half space and was allowed to do so because of his double pivot connection with Gundogan. So always having a single pivot between the two strikers allowed them to have more flexibility. This then allowed Cancelo on this right hand side to play in a more free role and get higher up the field. We would then see Kevin De Bruyne and Raheem Sterling occupy this right half space, sometimes creating enough superiority just by their positioning and the numbers they were able to accumulate in this right half space, with pinning from Sterling and Kevin De Bruyne getting on the ball to then progress straight through via positional superiority. But other times they'd have to use a third man movement targeting Rodri, who would then be positioned just beyond the first line of pressure, and then a ball into Sterling would then be able to find Rodri in behind the first line of pressure. So here we see Wolves in their 5-3-2 again, but now we see Manchester City more in their base structure before movement occurs. So we see now Fernandinho and Laporte being joined by Cancelo and Zinchenko, then now occupying the wide areas and stretching the connections in the first line of build-up with their fullbacks in a little bit more of a traditional sense. Then we go with a 4-man midfield that sees Kevin De Bruyne occupying this right half space, with then Bernardo Silva occupying the weak side on the left hand side. This then gives the base position of the double pivots in behind the first line of pressure, and then this is where the movement was able to occur from Rodri dropping deeper from this position in the blind side of the first line of pressure, and then decreasing the distance between this connection between the fullback and center back, where Rodri takes up the role of a narrow fullback in build-up to then get on the ball in deeper areas, decrease connections, and have a more well-established presence in the half space, with De Bruyne and Raheem Sterling inverting off of the right wing. We also see the strong connections that the double pivot have into these more advanced positions when they do maintain their double pivot from the first and second line. So they have strong positional connections right off the bat between the 3-man midfield of Wolves, and could often attract central defenders to then go and jump and create space in behind, potentially through Cancelo, the advancing fullback, or the wide winger holding the full width. So now we can see how the midfield structure can change when Rodri drops into a deeper position. Then we go with the midfield 3 in a more natural 4-3-3, still having the strong connections between the players and the defensive setup from Wolves. So now in the 5-3-2 from Wolves, we have a bit more diagonally compact Wolves, but still with the midfield Manchester City matching up very well against these midfield three. But from here we can also have the false nine, creating a diamond midfield, which we'll look at in just 1 second, as one of their structures. And now we can see the positioning of Kevin De Bruyne being very important in the blind spot of the two midfielders of Wolves, and some of the time we can then even see passing connections being strengthened into Kevin De Bruyne or Raheem Sterling in this area, allowing them to get on the ball and creating a third man movement, with Rodri then moving up the field and joining the attack while still maintaining his more stable fullback position, dropping in from the single pivot. So now we see the shape that Manchester City have used throughout most of the season with their diamond midfield, with now Rodri at the base. Then we see a more natural back four from Manchester City in this picture, with Cancelo then moving higher up the field and Raheem Sterling then occupying a more narrow position, trying to pin one of the defenders of Wolves. And this is often where Kevin De Bruyne was able to create most of his space from taking advantage of pinning from Raheem Sterling, who would then invert off of the right wing. And by playing in the right half space, it creates a strong diagonal connection from the fullback to Rodri to then Kevin De Bruyne, positioned in a free roll between the lines and in a very dangerous position if you are Kevin De Bruyne, with the ability to then come inside, and playing as a more of a number 10 or number 9 in the defensive phase made him very effective in transition as well. So here we have in the defensive phase, we have the 4-2-3-1 with Kevin De Bruyne taking up the number 10 role between the double pivot of Wolves. And Manchester City had a very intense press, often forcing the ball to the side it was originally played, and then Kevin De Bruyne would shift over to the nearest holding midfielder, with the weak side player pinching in to then create access both to the wide central defender and the weak side double pivot. Then Raheem Sterling would already be baiting the central defender to then go and play the ball, where he would then go and pressure and try and trap and win the ball higher up the field. So we see the base structure from Wolves already in a 3-2 build-up, which would then have a little bit more flexibility higher up the field because of the wingbacks holding the width. So now we'll look at a pretty good picture that can show the potential in Wolves' offensive structure. So we have our back three with asymmetric connections and moving into the wide area, typically as a residual effect from coming from a build-up phase that consists of a three-man back line overloading one side with two central defenders. So from here, we can see a 4-2-3-1 or 4-4-2 from Manchester City. We'll look at the spaces created and potentially used from Wolves. So now we highlight the back four and can start to look at the Wolves shape. So Wolves go with a double pivot that often vary in their horizontal connections between each other, and often one of them goes higher or into a wider position while the other holds the center of the field. We have Jimenez occupying the central striker role and creating a position of height, allowing Neto to drop in as more of an attacking midfielder, higher up the field though, but more in the left half space. This allowed then the wingbacks to create full width and allow this freedom for these players in the center of the field. And we also have on this right hand side, mirroring the positioning of Neto in the right half space between the lines, trying to then create more central passing options for the wide center defender on the ball, creating numerical overload from the ball carrier and into more advanced position. This then gives them strong connections playing out from the back and trying to progress in a smaller area that consists of tighter connections, allowing for interchange of play and fast movement going forward. But Manchester City was well organized, and this was very ineffective throughout the whole of the match. And this is where we're going to wrap up the analysis. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.